Hello there, YouTube. This is Sibbles and Bits back at it again with technically sit-down Saturday related content, especially because it's a follow-up to my last video, which had to do about why I was choosing the Witch Hunter ascendancy. And in that video, we talked a lot about Culling Strike and Decimating Strike, particularly how those are going to make clear seem pretty good. Now, to just go ahead and admit ahead of time, that was using a Path of Exile 1 assumption. Many other content creators did the same thing, but GGG released all of the skill trees last night, and in there was this bombshell right here. It doesn't look like you guys can see my mouse cursor, unfortunately. But if you look up at the top right, Culling Strike, Culling Strikes kill normal enemies if their life is at 30% or below. Magic enemies are killed at 20%, rares 10, uniques 5%. We already knew that this change was in effect because we were told in an interview that this is how this worked. However, until yesterday, we did not know these thresholds are checked before the hit of the damage is applied. So, the Path of Exile 1 mechanic for Culling Strike is, let's just use an example of you have, in this case, a white mob. And so we have a 30% cull according to PoE2. If we were to deal 80% of that white mob's health, it would be below the cull threshold, and the mob would die instantly in a single hit. Now in PoE2, because of the fact that these thresholds are checked before the hit of the damage is dealt, that mob will be there at 20%, and until we deal another source of hit, not necessarily damage. Again, this is a PoE1 assumption, but Culling Strike worked in PoE1 through things like Energy Shield, block, just straight up damage mitigation, so long as you hit the enemy, which meant that if the target evaded, or in that case dodged, it wouldn't work. So needless to say, you are going to have to do another hit to kill that same mob at 20% health, which feels bad. And so a lot of people are starting to sell their stonks in Culling Strike, and consequently also in Witch Hunter. I don't think that it's necessarily as bad as people are making it out to be. Like, yes, obviously we would prefer to have Culling Strike work the same way that it did in PoE 1, but it also sort of makes sense, thinking about it for a whole day here, that one, you have the monk, or at least quarter staves, with Killing Palm that is effectively Culling Strike. And so if you had access to Culling Strike, you literally wouldn't be able to use that. So it makes sense that Killing Palm will mark enemies that are in Culling Strike range, and then you just kill them, and there's nothing that they can do about it. So in the same guise, Culling Strike as it was is straight up depending again on what percentage you're talking about. Let's talk about rare monsters still. A 43% more damage, whereas Culling Strike as it is now is nowhere near that. I don't really have the time to calculate that, and it also has a lot of things to do about, okay, well, what is your attack time? Just all sorts of stuff. So sorry that I can't do that. But what I can stipulate is that this is not terrible, because Culling Strike in this fashion is still incredibly good slash exactly the same as we anticipate in instances where you are either rapidly dealing damage, either through skills like Ball Lightning, which is confirmed in the game. Mercenary has access to rapid fire, fragmentation rounds, pretty much all the shotgun skills basically. Deal a small amount of damage, but like a lot of times in sequence. So if you have enough damage to kill a mob in, like, say, 4, like, let's say, pellets out of your fragmentation rounds, then the 5th one will cull them, and you have another 2 that are just going off and can rebound off of terrain due to passive skill effects, so on and so forth, or hit other enemies in the pack. Versus bosses, if you're going to use rapid fire to charge up for your grenades, that can technically cull as you're setting up, and so on and so forth. There are the thing is that most of the skill types in the game, besides mercenary skill types, don't appreciate this type of culling strike. Notably, grenadiers, which is a mercenary archetype, because crossbows, with old culling strike, it would mean that you would just throw a grenade into a pack, and so long as it did enough damage, the whole pack is done. Now, you're going to, either kill the pack or you won't if you have enough damage, and even if you have culling strike, you're going to have to attack that pack again. A lot of people will say, well, okay, if I have to attack the pack again, then like the culling strike is doing nothing, because if I did 70% damage to the mob the first time, I'm going to do another 70% damage. Culling strike did nothing, which again is why doing lots of hits or less damage, which during your first run of the game you're going to have bad gear, theoretically speaking, so it's definitely going to be more useful. But if you're using a skill more like slams, I could definitely see that being an issue, because slams are more like very slow, theoretically speaking, and high upfront damage, which may honestly just like one shot packs anyways. But I think what a lot of people who are, again, selling stocks in Culling Strike are missing is that all the footage that we've had so far has people actually engaging with packs of white mobs. And in interviews, Jonathan has stated that there are mobs which are designed to be magic and rare monsters, and therefore they have typically more health. They're like mini boss monsters, right? And technically speaking, those are preferred to be chosen with magic or rare monsters. I believe that there was even one of the dervish enemies in Act 2 that was shown with the witch gameplay, where they specifically choose that mob to be a specter because of the fact that it's a more powerful mob, and it costs more spirit to do so because of that. You're still going to be running into those, even as whites. They were pointed out that, yep, even white mobs are just thrown in there to give you a bad time. So we really can't count out Culling Strike and the Decimating Strike line, but notably, in order to get to Decimating Strike, you do have to go through Culling Strike, which, again, Decimating Strike now definitely feels like it works a lot better for, say, automatic crossbows or shotgun crossbows and other skills that might come out in the future. As of the skills that we have right now and the weapon sets that we have right now, it is admittedly looking significantly like it's not looking as high value as it was before. I'm still planning on playing Witch Hunter. I'm still planning on leveling with Culling Strike because, again, I'm not going to have gear. I'm likely going to be leveling up everything, and I expect to run into packs of white mobs and packs of blue mobs that are going to give me a bad time, and so Culling Strike is going to help with that. But definitely to warn everybody who I was trying to math out before, think about your build and whether or not Culling Strike makes sense. Because at least at launch, you won't be able to change your class from, say, Witch Hunter over to Gemling Legionnaire. They want that choice to have impact. Now, if you do get stuck as a Witch Hunter, Witchbane line is also like significantly disgusting. Now that we actually have details on what concentration does, enemies have less cooldown recovery rate the lower the concentration, scaling down to 50% less when concentration is 0. So as long as you're able to keep damage uptime on the boss and do 40% of their health in, like, say, a chain or a combo that doesn't have a 5-second gap, they will be using their air quotes special attacks twice as or half the time, or in other words, the cooldown will be twice as much. So if they have something listed that, okay, you can only use this attack every 10 seconds, now they can only do it every 20 seconds. And if that's an attack that requires you to, like, dodge, get out of the way, etc., or take tons of damage, then that affects your damage uptime, because you either take the damage, lose the flasks, or you have to stop dealing damage. So this is obviously defensive because it puts you in dangerous situations less often, but it's also a damage buff because you just get to deal with the boss at their easiest state for most of the time. So just kind of keep that in mind. And then, of course, like Zealous Inquisition, Obsessive Rituals is still kind of up in the air until we know what sort of mobs are at the end game. And Weapon Master, I think, is absolutely roided. Obviously, I don't think that that's going to do much at the start of the game when you don't have passive points to actually like convert over into weapon skill points. Anyways, just wanted to get that out there today. I'm gonna try and edit this, get it out so that, anybody who is watching my video before, again, doesn't get baited into taking Culling Strike, Decimating Strike, when it doesn't really make sense for your build. Yeah, hopefully this was educational, and if you have any feedback for me, be it questions, comments, concerns, misplay alerts, be sure to throw those down in the comments below.